Can you self-publish a book in a year or less? I think absolutely that you can. You just have to be really organized about it. So today we're going to be going through all the steps that you need to take when you're self-publishing a book. We're going to talk about when you should be maybe working on those steps, how long each step in the process might take you, and basically we're going to be going through a template that I created and I use when I'm self-publishing a book, and it's a template that you can reference as you plan your own book launch. Hello everyone, my name is Mandy. I'm an author, the creator of the Book Launch Planner series, and I also have courses on book cover design and book formatting. I make weekly videos on the business of being an author, so if that sounds good to you, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon so you never miss a new upload. You can also join as a YouTube member to get early access to videos as well as behind the scenes content. Today we will be discussing editing, cover design, formatting, marketing, and the actual publishing of your book. And we'll be discussing not only the steps within those steps, but also how long it takes to do all these things. Now, the length of time that you'll need to complete each of these different steps during the self-publishing process will vary by author, especially if you're a new or first-time author. It's going to take you a lot longer to do some of these things than seasoned authors. Seasoned authors who have really kind of figured out a great workflow, it may take them only a fraction of a time of a first-time author. For me personally, it takes the longest for me to draft a new book, but once I draft a new book, it's mostly easy sailing from there because the editing is relatively smooth-ish depending on the book, and all the rest of the steps I have just honed and streamlined, and it's pretty seamless for me at this point. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about how you can plan your writing process. So if you're someone who has yet to write the first draft of your book, you want to start there. So I'll leave that video linked down below. In the video, I talk about creating your ideal writing week so you can find time to actually write your book. And then I've also talked about setting daily word count goals. So when you find the time to write, you can write a certain amount of words each day to stay on track. Again, that video will be linked down below. But today, we're assuming that you've already finished the first draft. The bane of my existence is finishing the first draft. But once that's done, the rest of it, to me at least, is really fun. And you get to do all the publishing stuff. So let's say you've finished your first draft and you're ready to actually get into the book launch planning phase. Where do we even start? That is where this fancy planner is going to be coming in handy. This is my book launch planner. This is a planner that I designed after publishing many books myself. This is kind of a template that I've created for myself when I'm planning my book launches. You can buy this off of Amazon. I personally get the hardcover editions, but you can also get it as a paperback. It'll be linked down below. Now, this is a planner full of templates and checklists, and they're all different things that you're going to need to reference during the book launch phase. So we have things about your genre and category, your Amazon keywords, your ideal reader profile. We have comparative titles, pitching your book, the book blurb, the self-publishing to-do list. We have a list of different marketing methods, and my personal favorite and what we'll be discussing today is the book launch timeline. So we're actually going to be on page 33, but you'll notice that the book launch timeline is a couple pages. And the book launch timeline is broken down into groups. So we have the editing, the cover, the interior, the details, the setup, and advanced reader copies. That is everything for the book launch timeline that we have in my book launch planner. So today I'm just going to go through things step by step with you because each step is in the planner, and then it also says how long each step might take you. Now, the caveat here is that this is an estimate. This is kind of what I've found to be the average, but again, if you're a new author, it may take you way longer, or if you're a seasoned author, you may not need this much time. So this is just kind of a starting point, and then you can kind of take it from there as you see fit. If you're an author who has self-published a book before, let me know in the comments down below how long each of these steps tends to take you. If you're similar to me in my estimates, or if you have a totally different timeline that you follow. So let's start with the editing phase. This is a phase that typically starts 8 or more months before you self-publish your book. So first up on our list is we have self-edits, and that should take you about a month. I found that's the fastest I personally can complete self-edits, and this is just going from the first draft of your book to doing self-edits, because the first draft's probably going to be pretty messy, and then you need to launch directly into self-edits just to make it good enough and understandable enough for beta readers, because the next step is to find beta readers. The actual process of finding beta readers can take you about 2 to 3 weeks, and typically when I want to find beta readers, I reach out to my newsletter subscribers and I have them fill out a form, and this form just asks them a bunch of questions so I can see if they're a good fit for the book, because obviously as someone who writes sweet romance, if I have a beta reader who only wants spicy romance and they read my sweet romance, they might not like my sweet romance, and that's okay. That just means they weren't a good fit for the book. So typically when I'm looking for beta readers, I, 1, make sure that they like the genre I'm writing in, 2, that they're a fan of the tropes I'm writing, and 3, that they can read the book in the timeline that I need. I typically try to give my beta readers about a month to read a book. But as you can see, the next step, which is book is with betas, I put down 1 to 2 months, because depending on how long your book is, you might want to give them up to 2 months to read the book and give feedback. Now, once the beta readers go through your book and give feedback, we can move on to the next step, which is implement edits, which I have written here, takes about 1 month. So you're going to go through all the feedback from your beta readers and just make edits based off of that feedback. Now, when it comes to any feedback, you can choose to take it with a grain of salt. You can choose to take all of it. Typically, you want more than 1 or a small handful of beta readers so you can get multiple perspectives on your book, because one beta reader may think this is stupid and the next beta reader may think this is awesome. So you kind of have to gauge and see what type of edits you should make, and be mindful of the fact that not everyone is going to love your book, and that's okay. Now, during the implementing beta reader phase, you'll also want to find an editor. So for me, I skip developmental edits because I do beta readers, and because my beta reader process tends to work so well, I don't hire a developmental editor anymore. I just hire a copy editor. So you'll want to find an editor at some point. Sometimes you have to book them far out in advance, so be mindful of that. I have here that it can take you about a month to find a book editor. I personally have found an editor on Upwork that I really like, and she's awesome. And typically she doesn't need a huge heads up, so I'm able to kind of reach out to her as I'm going through beta reader feedback and be like, hey, my next book is almost ready. Are you able to work on it? And typically the answer is yes. I just might have to be a little flexible with when I can give her the manuscript. That means we're moving on to the next step, which is the book is with the editor. This step will take 1 to 2 months. So it really depends on your editor and how long it takes them to edit. Obviously, the longer your book, the longer it's going to take them to edit. And also, it depends on how many other books your editor is working on at the same time. But I found about a month and a half, so 6 weeks or so, is how long an editor typically takes for my books. But you'll have to find out from the specific editor you go to hire. Now, our last step here is implement edits. Now, keeping in mind that the edits that we're implementing are just copy edits, which is a line-by-line basis rather than, like, we're not editing the plot of the book anymore. We're just editing things like grammar and sentence structure, kind of boring things. I know for me that copy edits are my weakest point, which is why I always hire someone for that step in the process. Now, sometimes sometimes I find that copy edits take me only a week to implement because, again, it's more or less brainless. You're just kind of going through what your editor said you screwed up and being like, oh yeah, I'm not good with grammar, and correcting things. It's not like you have to rewrite stuff. You're just fixing things on a sentence level basis. So once copy edits are done, we can turn the page and move on to the next step, which is send our book to proofreaders. And proofreading is really up in the air in terms of timeline. In here I say it takes about a month, but sometimes you want to take as much as 2 months to proofread your book, depending on what your proofreading process is, whether it's having multiple people help proofread the book, whether it's hiring a proofreader to proofread the book, or you just do all of the above to proofread your book. I typically take about a month to proofread. And then I also have a separate step here called make final edits. This is kind of like the book is proofread, but I just go through it one more time, reading it myself to double check that everything's all good. And that process takes about a week. And then I have another step because I am so prone to typos. Review final edits, again, another week of just doing that. I found sometimes I wait to review the final edits until the book is also formatted. So like I'll get a physical copy of the book and read through it, or sometimes I'll go in Microsoft Word and they have the read aloud feature and I'll listen to my book, and sometimes it's easier to listen and catch typos that way. All right, so that is all of the editing steps. We can now move on to the next set of steps, which is for the cover itself. And this is about 5 or more months before release. And I have a little note here to be mindful of how far in advance cover designers get booked out. Because if you have a super experienced cover designer, they can book out months at a time. I no longer work with cover clients, but when I did, I remember there was one point where it was like July and I was booked out until like the end of the year, which is really awesome. But obviously, as an author, that can be really stressful to book a cover designer when they're so booked out. So, keeping in mind that you might have to start some of these steps a little earlier, the first step here is to find a designer. That can take you about a month. As you can see, whenever you need to find some sort of freelancer, I give you about a month of time to do that because you want to do your research and check references and make sure that they're great to work with. Obviously, you can also design the book cover yourself. So if you choose to design the book cover yourself, be a little more mindful that the cover design process might take longer because you're designing it yourself. I actually have a course on book cover design, so it's a course bundle where you can buy all 3 courses or you can buy the courses separately depending on what your needs are. The first course is a course on Photoshop to just teach you Photoshop basics, and then the second course is a course on typography. It's the type of course you'll want to take if you hire an illustrator to illustrate the art for your cover, but you still need to add in the typography and format the wrap yourself. Then we have the third course. The third course teaches you how to design a book cover from scratch using stock photos. And all 3 courses work together and build upon each other. So typically, if you have 0 experience in cover design, I recommend getting the bundle of the courses rather than just the last course. But anyways, if you do decide to design your cover yourself, please, please, please give yourself extra time. I'm talking like you might even want to start designing the cover when you're still writing the book, just because the first cover you design is not going to be good. I would actually recommend that instead of trying to design your own cover, just design any covers. Just get familiar with the cover design process, figure out what looks good, what doesn't. And if you really want to, you can take like your favorite book that you've read and redesign that book cover yourself just to test out your skills. That way, by the time you sit down to design your book cover, you actually have some experience and the result will be pretty good. Anyways, moving on, going back, we have the next step being cover is being designed. Now, this is assuming someone else is designing the cover for you. The cover design process I have here written down as it takes 1 to 3 months. Now, typically when I worked with clients, I would take a month to design the initial draft and then another month or 2 after that for revisions. Some clients, we'd get it right off the bat. Other clients, it took a ton of of tweaking before we got to a final result. And that's a professional designing it. That's why I say if you plan on designing it yourself, give yourself a lot more extra time. And then the last step in the cover section is to actually reveal the cover, which is just a one-day event where you reveal the cover. And even though I say it's only one day, you're going to do a lot of planning up to cover reveal day to make the most out of your cover reveal, because typically your cover reveal day and your book launch day are the most exciting days of your book's life. So if you plan on doing a pre-order, make sure that you launch the pre-order at the same time as releasing the book cover. Like, you wouldn't want to release a book cover and then a month later say, oh, the book is available for pre-order. You want to do those things at the same time because it's exciting. And if you want a little help planning your cover reveal, you can actually turn to page 78 of the book launch planner, and this is the cover reveal checklist. This is literally just a list of things that you might want to do if you decide to do a cover reveal. Okay, so that's the cover. Let's move on to the next chunk of steps, which is the interior of your book, aka formatting your book. And this is something you want to do typically about 3 months before the release of your book. There's only 2 steps here. One of them is to find a formatter, which takes about a month, and the other is the interior is being formatted, which also takes about a month. Now, again, this is another step you can choose to do yourself. So if you choose to do it yourself, it's going to be a little different. You're going to want to give yourself more time if you choose to format yourself. I have a course on book formatting. I teach you how to format your book in Adobe InDesign, and you'll walk away with a formatted paperback and a formatted ebook. That's how I personally have formatted all my books. It's also how I've formatted all my clients' books when I've worked with them. I absolutely love Adobe InDesign, especially for paperback books and doing complex formatting. And for me, it actually only typically takes me about a day to format a book. So obviously the timeline for that is, for me, is way different. But for a new person or someone who's doing this for the first time, you're going to need a lot more time to format your book and probably work out the kinks. Let's move on to the next chunk of steps, which is the details. And this is kind of boring, but very necessary and very important steps. And again, this happens about 3 months before release, sometimes even sooner than that. 3 months is probably the latest you want to wait to start working on all these things. So step 1, write the book blurb. That takes about a week, sometimes more, a lot longer, especially if you have a lot of struggles with writing a book blurb. And then you also want to finalize your book blurb. I, again, give myself about a week to do that. I find the best thing for writing a book blurb is to send it to as many other people for feedback as possible, because your book blurb is so important. And then we also have your book's tagline. This typically I only work on for a day, and then I'll come back to it another day and work on it again for another day. This is just like a little snappy 1-sentence way that you pitch your book, but you also might want to figure out other ways to pitch your book besides just this quick little snappy tagline. I personally suggest starting off by going to page 22 in the book launch planner, and this is a page that just says pitch your book, and it has 5 different prompts on 5 different ways that you can pitch your book. I actually have moved on from this, and I actually try to figure out 10 different ways to pitch a book when I'm kind of brainstorming it, and I have it as like a Google document on my computer. So when I'm trying to pitch it on social media, I just kind of filter through the 10 different pitches I have for my books and kind of experiment and see which ones work best. Anyways, moving on, let's turn the page. Our next step is to identify our Amazon keywords and categories. This is another thing that is super, super important. I highly recommend that you use Publisher Rocket, which is a kind of software that you can use to research your Amazon keywords and categories. I have a whole separate tutorial just on that software. Actually, I have a whole playlist. So if you want to check out the whole playlist, you can do that as well. But there's one specific video that is specific to using that software for keywords and categories, and that'll be linked down below. I'm also an affiliate for Publisher Rocket, so if you end up buying the software, make sure to use my affiliate link. This is a software that I've used for years and years, and I'm still obsessed with it. Next step we have is to add your book onto Goodreads. This is kind of a quick little step. It should only take you a day to do it. I've only ever encountered issues where sometimes if I take too long to put my book on Goodreads, a reader will put my book on Goodreads for me, and then I have to like claim it, or I have to, now there's like duplicate listings on Goodreads and I have to merge them. And then sometimes when that happens, it takes more than a day, but typically, as long as you're the first one to add your book onto Goodreads, it should only take you one day to set it up. And the last step in this section is to reveal your book blurb. Typically, I reveal my book blurb on the same day I reveal my book cover, but sometimes that changes depending on what type of marketing plan we're doing. But again, that's just a one-day event. Okay, moving on to the next set of steps, we have the setup. This is actually getting your book up and ready to be published on your chosen distributor website. So this is happening about 1 month before release. And also keep in mind that if you're doing pre-orders, there will be specific deadlines that you need to upload your files by if you're doing pre-orders for your book. Typically, it's about like a week or two before the book is supposed to go live that you need to have your final files uploaded, and then those files are locked and you cannot touch them again until publication day. So be extremely mindful of that. For KDP, I believe it's about a week before the book goes live, but for Ingram Spark, I actually think it's a lot sooner than that. So just be very mindful, because if your files get locked, you're going to be very upset that you can't update them. But this is assuming that we don't have very specific upload dates and deadlines. So before your book goes live, you want to make sure you format your ebook. That's going to take you about a week. And I say the format the ebook in this steps because typically that's how long I wait to format my ebook. All the other formatting I did earlier is print book formatting, because you want to, you want to print it, you want to look at it in person, make sure it's good. But for ebooks, I save that till very last minute to format my ebooks, because sometimes there's also typos that you catch very last minute. It's just easier this way. You want to submit your files for your paperback, and again, that's just a one-day step, but you're going to want to submit them ahead of time. The good news is, previously for KDP, if you had a paperback book, you would submit the book to be published like almost a couple days before the book is actually supposed to be published, because it would take a couple days for it to show up on Amazon, and you never knew exactly when it would show up on Amazon. But now KDP actually updated their system where you get to choose your exact publication date and you can submit your files ahead of time and they get approved ahead of time, and you can make sure it's all good and ready ahead of time. And then the book actually won't go live on Amazon until the chosen date that you picked out. Whereas previously that wasn't a thing. Now it's a thing and it's great. But that does mean you have to upload your files about a week before the book is supposed to go live, which I think is a great trade-off. I wouldn't want to worry about the exact files a week before release day anyways. And then the last step I have here is to submit for pre-order. That's if you choose to have your book available for pre-order. If you do have your book available for pre-order, you're probably going to want to do it more than a month ahead of time. Typically, you're probably going to want to do it like 3 to 6 months before the book goes live to actually take advantage of the pre-order period, but you can definitely just do it a month ahead of time if you really wanted to. Okay, we moved on to the last section of steps in our planner, which is advanced reader copies. This is going to be happening about 1 to 3 months before the release of your book. You can have it go out a lot further than that, but I feel like 3 months is probably the sweet spot. There will be very specific deadlines depending on which print-on-demand company you're doing. Find advanced reader copy readers. That's going to take you about a month. Again, I think your newsletter subscribers are the best place to start with. My book, Sparks in Iceland, I only used NetGalley for art copies, and it was a pretty good experience. I have now 2 videos on NetGalley. One is an older video of my experience on NetGalley for the very first time. You can watch that video. It's a very in-depth guide. And then I have a second video on NetGalley that just went live. That'll be also linked down below. The second video is not quite as in-depth, but it was a very different experience because For my first time on NetGalley, I went directly through NetGalley, and then for my second time on NetGalley, I actually went through a co-op where it's going to be significantly cheaper, and I actually had a way better experience going through a co-op as well. I highly recommend you watch both of the NetGalley videos because they were both totally different experiences, and if you're considering NetGalley for yourself, you can decide which you think is the better fit. So that's how I do ARC readers, but you can also find ARC readers yourself manually, whether you go to your newsletter subscribers or find people on social media. But if you do it yourself, you're obviously going to need to send out your ARCs. That's a one-day thing, but sometimes you have to figure out how to send that out, and that's a whole process. I actually really like using BookFunnel for sending out advanced reader copies or just sending out any ebook copies of my book in general. I really like using BookFunnel. And then our very last step is to remind readers to review, and that is a one-day thing, and that is on release day. So obviously if you send out advanced reader copies, when release day comes, you want to reach out to everyone who read your ARCs and just remind them, hey, it's release day. If you write a review, please be sure to do so on Amazon and on Goodreads and post it on social media if you'd like to. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's just a quick little email reminder. Anyways, that is all the steps that I have in the book launch timeline. Now, there's, of course, a ton of other templates and checklists in this planner. This is truly like a blueprint for self-publishing your book. It's something that I use personally because it just helps you not forget any steps. Like, there's so many checklists in here that you can check out. And this is just a broad overview. That's the best part, is this is just a very kind of vague idea of everything because there's so many different directions you can take when you're planning to launch your book. There's many different marketing techniques you can do, and I've tried a bunch of them, and I still, with every book I release, tend to do something pretty different just to see what works and what doesn't. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. All the resources I mentioned are going to be linked down below. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and you can also request ideas for future videos. Otherwise, that is it for today, and I'll see you all in the next video.